Salutations and greetings. Very honored to be here from the ultimate presentation. And you're probably wondering, as Rabbi Spike mentioned, what language I'm talking. It's called the King's English. The other interesting thing about me, if you expected to hear someone serving in the IDF say, I must to, how you say when I was in Tzahal, I grew up just like many people in this room, outside of the state of Israel. And I was 17, something happened in my life, what's called a moment of truth, a rega shel emet in Hebrew, that literally made me take the road less traveled. And that decision, time comes up sometimes in your life when you least expect it, when you're confronted with something, and the decision you make can literally change the course of your life. And it happened again on October the 7th, 2023. When, again, a decision I made ended up changing the course of my life and hopefully saving the course of other people's lives as well. So I wanted to look at this before and after. This is our trigger picture to start with. Very few people will have a picture like this. If you can do the math, there's a 34-year gap between me on the left and me on the right. You can see a much skinnier version of me on the left with a lot less equipment on. And then you can see me over here on the right last year with 50 pounds of medical and combat equipment on. But what they have in common besides the same person, it's on the same background. They're both on a beach in northern Gaza. To see when you go to the beach in Gaza, there's a slightly different clothing etiquette, which doesn't involve swimmers and flip-flops. But again, there's no other place. You will never find anyone in Israel with this picture, with a 34-year gap, serving as a combat infantry medic in Israel. How that came to be, I want to explain to you as a bit of the introduction. The way I want to do this brief presentation is tell you a bit about me personally and the decisions of what my unit does in the IDF. Then we're going to flip the second side and go over to some moral and ethical dilemmas that the IDF has in Gaza as well. So we're going to start with the personal, and then we're going to flip over to the more general. That's the way I want to do it, and I would definitely leave time at the end for Q&A if any questions you have. It's very interesting to hear first-person accounts as well. When someone says I as opposed to they, it also adds a huge element to a presentation. So let's start with the I, the kid on the left over here. It's 18-year-old Tuvia. So I mentioned I grew up outside. I grew up in the UK and in South Africa. I know there's a lot of South Africans in Atlanta. So do we have any in this room, former South Africans? Just one? How's it? Ach, shame, man. I miss my maid. All right, so basically, I know it's a hot spot. Unfortunately, there's only one here. I'll make more fun of you later, don't worry. Okay, so basically, I grew up in South Africa and the UK, but I don't talk with the heavy South African accent because my parents are from the UK. But anyway, I grew up like the kids I just literally spoke to now in the Hebrew school. I just spoke to 15-year-old kids. I think they're in like grade 9 probably in the Hebrew school, and I was like them. Dressed like them, thought like them, played the same sports, heard the same music. The moment that changed my life, to give a quote from Samuel Longhorn Clemens, otherwise known as Mark Twain, very good, from Hannibal, Missouri. He famously said, and this one is my favorite quote, even though I have a doctorate in education, and that is, don't let school get in the way of your education, right? A well-known quote. And it basically, he's basically saying that you can't replace an experience. Experience is the best education. And one of the best ways to get experience is to travel and leave your bubble. Now, I know you've heard it a million times, but you all live in a bubble because all our friends are just like us. That's why they're our friends. But when you travel or go to a third world country or even go to Israel, you don't really get Israel till you've been there. Are there any people here who are still Israel virgins who have yet to go to our homeland? Okay, so all these amazing talks with people with English South African accents and all the movies you can see and all the books you can read, you don't get it till you go there yourself and form your own opinion. You cannot replace an experience, right? It's that simple. I've been educated my whole life. I grew up in a Zionist youth movement called B'nai Akiva, both in South Africa and in the UK. And I talk about Ks. I'm also a PK as well. I'm a preacher's kid. So I grew up with a lot of Zionism injected into my veins. I'd read the books. I'd seen movies, I'd heard speakers. Till I got to Israel, I didn't actually get it. And that's the way it is. You can't replace an experience. And it's not so much the places you see when you travel, it's the people you meet, especially if they're not like you. It makes you think about things very, very differently. I remember the first time I went to India to volunteer. I'm also an artist as well. I went to teach art in the slums in Kalva in Mumbai. And I'd seen Slumdog Millionaire, but you just don't get it till you're there. You just cannot understand the level of poverty, the overcrowding, how fortunate we are in the first world till you're actually there and smell it, touch it, and feel it. Use your senses. It's the same with Israel. When you get to Israel, you'll realize it's not just history that we've been learning about the whole time. It's not his story, it's not her story, it's our story. You feel part of it. These are our people, right? Am echad belev echad. One nation, one people. And because we have a relationship with this country that's basically kept us Jewish, even in exile, we can't just go when times are good. Well, I'll go when there's no stress, when there's no tension in Israel. If you think like that, you'll never go. Good friends, real friends, are not fair weather friends. I'll go under any circumstances, especially when your friend really needs you. And Israel needs the diaspora, and the diaspora needs Israel. So when I was 17, I went to a gap year in Israel, and what changed my life was meeting my peers, my Israeli peers, because they looked like me but grew up in a very different set of values. I just spoke with the 15-year-olds, and they're familiar, as I'm sure you are, with JFK's famous soundbite from his inauguration speech, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but..." Well mumbled, okay? Everyone can mumble that one, everyone knows it. But the question is, how many 17, 18-year-olds, when they finish high school, don't just go straight to college and put their lives on hold? We all know that he was talking about the Peace Corps, right? He was talking about the Peace Corps, about kids who said, wow, I grew up in the first world country, I have a roof over my head, water, all this stuff, amazing. Let me go and spread the wealth and make the world a better place. How many people do you know in your family or anyone in this room who's actually stopped their lives for 2 years and done the Peace Corps? If you have, good for you, and you're the exception that proves the rule, all 3 of you, right? 4 of you, right? 5 of you, even better. And that, by the way, is a large number usually when I speak to Jewish audiences, or any audiences in the United States. Everyone knows the soundbite, but very few people actually, they know the words, right? They know the words, but they haven't actually done it. And it's a very unusual thing to do, to ask anyone to stop their lives for 2 or 3 years, do something selfless, and then go back to their own lives. However, there's a whole bunch of teenagers in Israel who do that. And they're basically finishing high school, and the top thing on their mind, besides snogging, the top thing on their mind is where are they going to serve their country for 2 or 3 years? Military service, national service. Whereas when I was growing up, as your kids or grandchildren, the top thing on their mind is where they're going to college. Me, I, and the whole lives are planned up. College, suburbs, 2.2 kids and a dog, that's a national average. And the whole life is mapped out. I went to Israel for a gap year when I was 17, and it just blew me away, simply because I met kids with very different values, the values of service, the values of giving. And because of my own background of having my mother's side of the family, my grandparents on that side were the only survivors from the Holocaust, one from Poland, one from Hungary. And my dad's side of the family, my grandfather, who I'm named after, he fought in the greatest generation in World War II in North Africa and Italy. So on one side, fighters, the other side, Holocaust victims. It made me think a lot differently when I met these kids. And nobody was surprised by the end of the year. Rather than go to University College London, I enlisted as a lone soldier in a unit called Givati, which is a Marine combat unit. And as a speciality, I chose to be a combat medic, because that is a speciality which is you can use your entire life. It's not just, oh, I'm a heavy machine gunner or I'm a sniper. Great, that's got good military, but if you're a combat medic, it's good as a parent, it's good as a general citizen. It's just a good profession to have, and it gives you a lot of self-confidence. It's the worst thing to be in a situation where someone's struggling and you don't know what to do, right? So I chose that course. It was an arduous course. I had to learn another language called medical Hebrew, right? I thought my Hebrew was okay by then. I get in there, start talking about one-way vowels in Hebrew. I'm like, what? So my first weekend was getting a medical Hebrew dictionary. Anyway, that's a brief bit of the guy on the left. I want to switch over now. And by the way, the big lesson I learned in basic training was the Mishahu lesson. Does anyone here know what Mishahu means in English? That's a Hebrew word, Mishahu. Anyone know? I hear it? I think I heard a murmur here. A Mishahu. What's a Mishahu? Whoever. It means somebody. It's a somebody lesson, right? So everyone says, what does that mean? So what's basic training about? It's about getting a bunch of selfish, self-centered teenagers, in other words, teenagers, and getting together over a period of time to work as a cohesive unit and to be selfless and to think about things beyond them. That's the psychology of basic training. So yes, you do learn you're capable of a lot more than you think you are. If someone would have told that skinny kid there he's going to march for 90 kilometers, 60 miles with half his body weight on in 14 hours, no way, no how, I did it. So lesson number one, we're all capable of a lot more than we think we are. Lesson number two, real friendship, not just fair weather friends. You learn that in the army, people who literally take a bullet for you and you take a bullet for them. But the third lesson, the most important lesson, reverberated on October the 7th, 2023. And that's the Mishahu lesson. In basic training in the military, you run around a lot. Shloshim zur, 30 here, 30 there. That's all you hear the whole time. There's always a time in the middle of the basic training when your officer says, okay, you've got 5 minutes to rest in the tent. So you come in with all your gear and your gun and your boots and everything on. And then he'll stand outside and he'll say, I need someone to come out. And what's the natural reaction of teenagers? No, Mishu. Everyone's like, someone. Right, and the next words you hear from him are 2 words, which is kula machutza, everyone out. And you run around again for another half an hour in the sun. And it asks the same question. When do you get what basic training is about? What has to happen? What has to happen? Either everybody or you. You say, you know what, it's the right thing to do. I let my mates rest, I'll go outside. And next time someone else will do the right thing. To do the right thing, that is the basic lesson. Don't say, let someone else do it. If everyone said that, the world would never get better. Let someone else do it. We all know there's inequality in this world. Let someone else take care of it. I'll just take care of myself. No. Basic training teaches us, if it's a problem that concerns the world or our people, you have to be part of it. You have to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. I'm now going to, there's people in this room who I know could tell me exactly where they were when JFK was assassinated. It was so traumatic, right? There's probably people in this room who can also tell me exactly where they were when Princess Diana was killed by the British Secret Service, right? And so I'm sure, conspiracy theory, all right, I'm sure there's people about that. But everybody in this room, I can't tell you about JFK because I wasn't even a twinkle in the milkman's eye then, but I can ask everyone sitting in this room who's concerned about Israel. That's why you're here today. You're here to hear a presentation about the military, about Israel, about the IDF, where they were on that terrible Saturday of Simchat Torah when they started hearing what was going on in Israel, right? Sure, everyone can tell me where they were, but the next question I'm going to ask you is what emotions went on your mind as the numbers started pouring in. It just started how many people are being killed, how many people are being kidnapped, and the numbers are just rising and rising and rising like some kind of surreal horror movie, right? What emotions were you guys feeling at the time? Let me hear a few people what was going on in their mind as these numbers were hitting them. Anger. Horror and shock. Fear, I heard as well. Right? Any other emotions? Pardon? A sense of helplessness, right? And? Anger, yep. Revenge, right? Nakuma in Yiddish. All right. Pardon? And here we go again on a much worse scale, right? So we all know the stats, right? It's the greatest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Yesterday in Atlanta, I actually went to see a movie playing pretty locally, October the 8th. Anyone seen that film? Right, so I'm going to say it was horrific. Not just what happened, but also the reaction in the diaspora, and especially on college campuses. I'm actually from here going to Emory to speak to the students in Emory who've been having a pretty hard time. So that's also shocking as well, not just what happened, but the reaction on college campuses and in the United States and around the world generally, right? Where the victim it suddenly becomes the perpetrator. A whole inversion of reality, almost like Orwellian, where good is bad and bad is good. So these are a lot of emotions. The question is, what did you do about those emotions? How many people sitting here in this room have been to Israel since October on a mission or to volunteer in Israel? Okay, so a couple in the whole room. So afterwards, I'm going to preempt one of your questions. What can we do? That's the most important thing you can do. Literally boots on the ground, right? If you feel and empathize and feel about Israel, you shouldn't just wait for the good times to go. Now is the time when the country's bleeding. Now is the time when the country needs you to volunteer and show them that you love them. Not just making the donations, which is amazing, but also actually going there and giving a literal and figurative hug to our Israeli brothers and sisters. So how does this all affect me? How did I end up being this guy over here? So I was 55 years old at the time, even though I don't look it. And, gee shucks, thanks. And I was sitting there in Modi'in, where I live, which is between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, lovely little town. And any of you have family or friends in Modi'in? Anyone? One. Modi'in, yeah, that's the Hanukkah story. It's a real place. What? What? You went there? Wow. I'll get your autograph later. Okay. So basically, Modi'in's a real place, right? I was just sitting there as Middle Israel. That's basically what it is, literally and figuratively. And on that Saturday morning, the siren went because we have an Iron Dome anti-missile battery pretty close to us, just protecting the airport. And by the way, targeting an international airport is a war crime. When we start talking about war crimes, we're going to go down the whole list over here. And the siren goes at 6:28, I think it was, 6:27 in the morning. And I thought, as one lady here said, oh, here we go again. It's just like those crazies in Gaza shooting a few missiles our way. And then you sit there and you watch the news, the numbers are rising, and all those emotions you guys spoke about, that's what I felt as well. The anger, the frustration, the helplessness, the shock. Like, how can this happen? We're supposed to be the never again generation, right? This is what it means to have an army and to have an independence and to be in charge of our own destiny and not to rely on the pity of our host nations. This should not be happening, and yet it is. And the very first thought that went into my mind was something that had been drilled into me all those decades ago, and that basically was, what can I do, right? And that's a very Jewish thought as well. I've guided many, many birthright trips. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the birthright. And one of the things I always say to these kids who are barely Jewish, you know, you could be Christian, you can be Muslim, but you can be Jewish, right? You can't be Christianish or Muslimish or Buddha-ish, but you can be Jewish. So most of the kids who come on the birthright tips are definitely the emphasis on the ish as opposed to the Jew. One of the core things I tell them about being Jewish is to Jew is to do, right? To Jew is to do. It's not to talk the talk, it's to walk the walk. I mentioned that on our Friday night sermon. The first commandment the first Jews got was lech lecha, or lechi lach, right? You go, right? If it's the right thing to do, do it, right? Put your money where your mouth is and walk the walk. So my very first thought was, what can I do? What can I do? Okay, I'm a trained combat medic, yes, but I had not been to the military since 2006, which was the second Lebanon War. I was wounded then, I was wounded out, and I was honorably discharged. I was almost 40 years anyway, which is the age when you finish doing reserve duty. But like every other Israeli who's been in a combat unit, you keep a uniform just in case, the just in case uniform in your basement. And my first thought was, okay, I'm a medic, what can I do? I can save people's lives. And I heard a rumor, this is the way things work in Israel, I heard a rumor that somewhere in the Negev, there's a base where they're looking for military combat medical personnel, paramedics, military doctors, combat medics, because Israel's going to have to respond to this, as any other country would respond to this outrage. So based on the rumor, I got a Waze, like a statistic, a Waze numbers. I just put it in the Waze and started. I got my uniform, which anyone's heard the podcast of Dan Cena. The biggest surprise of that was it still fit after 16 years. Autographs later. And basically got down to got down to the car, packed stuff, like threw some stuff in a backpack, put in this Waze coordinates, drove down there. I don't know where the heck I was going. I was just driving and driving and driving for hours down to the Negev. And just before I pull into where I'm supposed to stop, I thought, wow, this is Bashert. I don't know if you know that Yiddish word. It was meant to be, because just as I was turning in, I saw my old basic training base. I thought, wow, I'm literally completing a circle from all those years ago. I get to the base, and they say to me, okay, well, your papers have just been called up, and I don't have any papers. And they're like, well, you can't go in. So anyone who spent any time in Israel, who knows Israelis, will know that in Israel, no isn't no, right? No does not mean no, right? If you're my father and you come from England, you're very prim and proper. If they say no, you say, oh, thank you very much, sir, and you go away. In Israel, no just means start negotiating, right? That's just what it means. There's nothing you can do about it. So the guard at the gate with all the combat gear and everything said, you can't go and you don't have papers. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I was in the base about 5 minutes later, and I'm like, what? That's a really short version of it. I could tell you more, but I'd have to shoot you. But anyway, so I was wandering around this base, literally selling myself. I went to different medical combat units. Say, hi, my name's Tuvia. I'm a combat medic. I was in Gaza. I was in Lebanon. I served in Givati. After the army, I was on Mada, on the Red Magen David Adom as an ambulance medic as well. I have all this experience. I'm fit. Take me. Anyway, after only an hour, I managed to convince one of the units to take me by sheer pushiness and charisma, or whatever you want to say. But anyway, they took me, and the guys, wow, you're really like, you. He asked me some basic questions. Oh, I can see you know your stuff, you're qualified. It's like riding a bike, you don't forget it. And he said, I'll take you, just go and speak to the Shalishut, which is the army bureaucrats, and I'll get you back in the unit. Again, anyone who doesn't know about Israel, bureaucracy in Israel is medieval, right? And that's a British understatement. We might be the startup nation with all the high tech. When it comes to bureaucracy, it is beyond convoluted. So the first thing they said is, what's your personal number, like your military number? So I gave it to them. They put it in the computer and said, dude, like, you haven't been in the army for 16 years. Why don't you just go home and maybe we'll call you? And I said, okay, obviously you've never heard two words, Tuvia book. I'm here. I've got a sleeping bag in my backpack, and I'm not leaving until you get me back in the army because that unit wants me, and I need to serve in that unit. So after 2 days of literally living in their veins, not literally, but figuratively, they said, okay, just go already, and they put me back in the army. So that's how I got back in. And when I got back in, the crazy thing I found the first time I got there was I wasn't the only one with a crazy story, right? Now, you might be mathematically challenged, but Israel had 130% turn up when that war broke out. How did that happen? Because people who were too old begged to go back to units. There was a guy who, I kid you not, who was in like a half body cast after a car accident, who just wanted to come and just hand out the equipment and uniforms. Everyone wanted to do something, right? And I got into the unit and I found out who our people are. I'm not going to talk politics here at all, right? This is not a political discussion. This is a discussion who the people of Israel are. I got there, and there were some young people in our unit, very young, and there's people who are very old. There's also, I'm the oldest, but there's people who are old. I thought they were going to call me grandfather or Saba Tuvia, which is like grandfather Tuvia or something like that, or Tuvia the milkman. Instead, for reasons I can tell you about later, my nickname was Santa Claus. How I got that one, I'll tell you about in a second. But anyway, a bit later. So basically, I got there and found out everyone had a story. One young guy had literally finished his service. He was 2 weeks into his year trip after the army in India. He heard what happened, canceled his ticket, came straight back home again. Another guy had finished his service, had gone back home to Argentina, where his parents were from, and he hadn't seen them for 3 years of service, heard about the war, got 4 different planes, and came straight back to serve again. They're the young ones. Some of the young kids dropped out of college for the duration, including 2 of my unit who were in medical school who dropped out because this is more important than their own personal lives. And of course, as you go on in life, you have more and more reasons not to serve. And one guy in my unit had donated a kidney literally a month before. He had 6 kids, 3 of them were serving in Gaza as well, and he was aged out, and he still fought his way back in as a paramedic. One of the doctors, this amazing guy, he was a doctor, surgeon, psychologist, one of these Renaissance-type people in his mid-40s. He'd been doing a subspecialty in the UK in utero surgery, and he left to come back to serve as a surgeon in the military and a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And he had 3 young daughters, which I thought was unbelievable. And he told me after 4 months before he went back to England, that he needed his wife's blessing to come out. I thought, wow, that's really nice, that he asked his wife. And then he told me that she has stage 4 cancer, stage 4 breast cancer. And the reason he needed the blessing, she said, you go out and save lives. What's going to happen is going to happen to me anyway. You do what you need to do. So you have these incredible stories. I could go on the whole afternoon telling you stories upon stories upon stories. But the main thing about the military is no one actually really cares about your background. Like, no one cares if you're rich or poor, or you're Ashkenazi or Sephardi, or you're Jewish or not Jewish. We have Russian Orthodox Christians. We have Druze soldiers. We have Muslims as well. No one cares about your gender. We have boys and girls. The unit's about 40% women in our unit. No one cares about your socioeconomic status or about your political leanings, left wing, right wing. The 2 top surgeons in our unit are as opposite as you could possibly imagine. One has a same-sex partner, he's got an earring and tattoos, and he would vote way on the left side of the political spectrum. And his surgeon buddy, who he works shoulder to shoulder with, has got tzitzis hanging out and a kippah and would vote probably way to the right of the political spectrum, but no one cares. Because once you put that green uniform on, you're there for one purpose and one purpose alone, and that's to serve, and in the case of my unit, to save people's lives. All right, so now I'm going to tell you about a bit of the work of our unit. I'm going to slip onto another picture, and then we're going to go into some of the ethical moral dilemmas and have some Q&A. The photos, where are the photos? Let's do the, oh no, that's not, is that a photo or still?
This is a photo. That's
Yeah,
a still.
that one is still, yeah, that one there.
This one?
Okay. What in there? Yeah, that's the one there. Okay, so this picture was taken about 2 months ago, just before the current ceasefire, which is now no longer a ceasefire as of a week ago, if you're following the news. And this is showing medical, I'll show you the video in a second. This is a wounded soldier lying here on the ground in Gaza. It's chucking down with rain. And this is my team. We have a photographer and video guy in the team because he takes pictures and videos so we can do best practices afterwards and figure out how to improve what we're doing. And he's taking a picture of this guy here. You can't see deliberately, but he's actually missing one of his limbs. His arm has been blown off. He's got shrapnel and bullets in him. We're treating him, waiting for the medical evacuation helicopter, the Black Hawk helicopter, to come in and take him out. And it's chucking down with rain. We're wearing 50 pounds of gear. And what you can't see is also there've been mortars fired on this area literally about 2 minutes before as well. So under fire, we're treating this guy in the rain, right? And when I say we, you can't tell because everyone's got the green on. There's men and women over here as well, and people from all different backgrounds. And once you've got that green on, no one can tell. It's totally irrelevant about all the other things I told you about as well. I'm going to show you a video of what happened next soon. But let me just tell you briefly what we do. It's called the Palomar unit, which is a Plugat Lechima Merchavit Refuit, which is a bit of a mouthful, which literally means a medical extraction combat unit. And when a soldier's wounded, the thing that's going to save their life is get them out as fast as they can to get them in an OR, in a hospital. Now, again, we don't build MASHs in Israel because we don't need them. It's a very small country. We don't need mobile army surgical hospitals. Though I wouldn't mind if hoplets came around, but we don't need that. So what we do is to get them out quickly. 3 things. We have used technology. We use the medical skills of the personnel and speed. That's what saves people's lives. Now, until this happened, until this war happened, people thought it was impossible to evacuate a wounded soldier from the battlefield from the moment they're wounded to a rear echelon hospital in less than an hour. We do it, right? We broke the golden hour. And it's been such a revolution that we've had medical military personnel from the NATO, from the United States military, and from the UK Army coming in to see exactly how we do it and learn from us as well. So it happens in 3 ways. First of all, the treatment starts straight away. There's an embedded medical team with the soldiers when we're wounded. Then they call us in with the medical cavalry. We come in to get them out. We come with armored ambulances and armored cars. If it's moderate or light wounds, in other words, not immediate life-threatening, we'll load them up onto our armor-plated ambulances and we'll scoot out to the nearest hospital, either in Ashkelon or in Beersheba, whilst treating them the whole way. If the wound is critical, like this soldier over here, now we have to call in the helicopters, which are these Black Hawk helicopters, which you might or might not know are not armed. So they come in, they're on the ground for about 30 seconds, about to show real footage. They take off again. They're shadowed on the top by Apache helicopters, which are armed to make sure the medical evacuation is not challenged. And we've got to get them out super, super fast. Now, what's the medical technology going on here? The first thing is that as this is happening, there's another soldier standing slightly off screen here with what looks like an iPad, but it's not actually an iPad. It's a device that's recording the treatments that are going on. And as it's being recorded, it's being beamed real time to the helicopter coming in and also beamed to the surgeons at the hospital waiting so they can follow the treatment the whole way. So, for example, in this case, we just got his vein open and because he had sunken veins because of the shock, and we had to open up a vein on the ankle to get the treatment. And then the helicopter's dying in 20 seconds. So we couldn't say, no, wait a second, we've got to put what we need to put in. No. So the helicopter lands, but they saw where we were, and they were waiting on the helicopter with the treatment, and they just carried on fluidly the whole time, right? The other thing we have is high-tech devices which sound like science fiction, but we actually have them. For example, we have mobile ultrasound scanners as well. So even in battle, we can tell what's going on inside, internal injuries. We have cameras that go at the end of a laryngoscope, so we can actually see where the airway is blocked real-time on video camera. We're also the only military on the planet Earth that uses real blood. Every other military will use a plasma substitute, right, which is only for some of the blood cells, and it's artificial. We're using O-negative blood. So anyone who goes to Israel on a mission, and if you happen to be O-negative, which is universal donor, the best thing you can do whilst you're in Israel, which literally saves lives if you are O-negative, is go and donate blood to Magen David Adom. So we have climate-controlled O-negative blood with us at all times, and that also helps the treatment and helps it speeds up the recuperation much faster using real blood, right? And I can go on and on and on about these incredible tools we have. But the most important thing we have is unbelievably trained medical professionals, doctors, paramedics, combat medics, and we work as a team, we work together, we triage, right, the whole time. Now, if you want to see real time, and this is not a made-for-TV movie, an actual evacuation, I'm going to show you what happened next. So once the soldier had been relatively stabilized, right, then we call in the helicopter. The helicopter comes in, and check this out. This, again, is not a made-for-TV movie. This is the actual footage of an evacuation from the Gaza Strip. You're about to see my team running to the helicopter. There we go. The helicopters landed behind a blast wall to stop incoming fire. "24 seconds later, it takes off again. And on that helicopter, there's a combat doctor and a flight paramedic as well, who are carrying the treatment on seamlessly. Now, again, I used the example before of Princess Diana. If she would have been in that car crash in the tunnel in Paris, it would have happened in Israel, she would still be alive today. One of the reasons she died is the treatment wasn't there. She was actually alive and conscious and talking when the accident happened, but they waited to get to the hospital before they started treating her. By that time, she'd already was almost dead from internal bleeding. The way that we do it is we start the treatment straight away, and it's fluid and continuous all the way to the hospital as well. So that's real footage. This is going on multiple times a day. So whilst you might be caught up in the media about the actual casualties, about young men and women, and not so old men as well, and family people who've entered eternity, and unfortunately that number is close to 1,000 since October the 7th of IDF personnel, what you're not hearing is there's been an estimated 18,000 wounded who've been saved because of these type of evacuations. That's you're not hearing, because they didn't die, but they're wounded, but they're going to be alive. And not all physically, some of it is psychological as well, PTSD, all sorts of things going on. But because of the evacuations, because of the speed, because of the professionalism, because of the technology, their lives are saved. So that's a brief snippet into what the life is like inside these type of units. And what I want to do now is to flip over to something else. When you're in the army, you're very much basically you're blocked from the outside world. You're in your own zone. We're there just to save lives. That's what adrenaline is for. That's what our purpose is, what our meaning is. Insulated is the word I'm looking for. We're very much insulated from the outside news. But when you do go out, sometimes it's quite shocking to read what mainstream media is reporting about how we are acting inside a combat zone, inside a war zone. And especially when I saw this film yesterday about October the 8th, all the things Israel's being accused of genocide, a disproportionate use of force, of being an immoral army. It's quite shocking when you know that the reality is a polar opposite when you're actually inside, you see what's going on. So I prepared a brief PowerPoint about some of the basic questions which we listen to and deal with. I'll be speaking with some of these issues in Emory University in a few hours as well, about accusations. So just start from the beginning. Oh, that's a nice picture. Okay. So again, this is the Black Hawk medical evacuation. Just go to the first slide, if you don't mind, Stephen. All right, next one. Just click again. All right, so what's the first thing that comes to your mind when the IDF is mentioned? Let's ask you guys. Let's just some adjectives. When you hear the word IDF, what are you thinking? Courage. Strong. Bravery. Okay, great. All positive, right? If I was going to go to Emory University, theoretically, this afternoon and speak to a non-Jewish audience and say, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when the IDF is mentioned? What do you think, adjective do you think I'll be getting this afternoon? Murderers, baby killers, or we put a bit of blood on as well, so it makes the matzah more chewy. What else? Genocide, all these negative connotations. I'm speaking here to what's called a home crowd, right? I'm preaching to the choir. The reason you came to this is because you're proud of our country, you're proud of our military. We all know that Israel has challenges. We all know that. I'm not mentioning politics here because that would be a whole different discussion. We know there's lots of issues going on, but deep down we know that we are proud and we're also honored and privileged as well to be living in this generation. It's an age of miracles and wonders, right? Just think about it. If you had to go back in time to 1945, to that last death march leaving Auschwitz, and you told striped prisoners in the snow that you come from a time in the future where there is a Jewish state, and there is a Jewish military, and there are Jewish farmers, and Hebrew's a spoken language, we're in charge of our own destiny, they would fall on their faces thinking, that can't be, we've yearned and hoped and prayed for 2,000 years, yet this is our reality. So we understand we do live in blessed times. We understand, like any other country, or perhaps in more ways, is all our challenges and the things that need to be fixed about Israel. But deep down, we're proud, and that's why your adjectives are all positive. However, to quote Joseph Goebbels, the infamous Nazi propaganda minister, if you get a line repeated over and over again, people are going to start believing it. It's called the big lie theory. And eventually people are going to say, wait a second, can the whole world be wrong and Israel right? And the answer is yes, the whole world can be wrong and Israel can be right, but how do you show that? And the main reason when you're making the case for Israel, and I work a lot with teens on Israel advocacy on college campuses, is not to get emotional. You have to speak about Israel without cringing or crying or apologizing or yelling. And how do you do that? 3 ways. A, you need to come in with the pride. B, you need to have the knowledge. And C, which is just as important, is the delivery, right? My high school history teacher said, to be an effective communicator or educator, you have to know everything, but you also have, it's not what you say, it's how you say. In other words, less is more and more is less. So let's look at some basic things here. All right, so the answer to that, let's look over here. We need to start with war crimes. Israel over and over again is accused of war crimes, right? So let's see what a war crime is. First of all, before we start clicking on this thing here, let's see what this picture is. This is a drone shot in the Gaza Strip. And even if you can't read the writing, I'll tell you what's going on over here. This is the red square here is a Hamas training compound. And off it, there are tunnels. There's a tunnel going to a civilian house over here, so they can pop up in this house over here and shoot at soldiers. And it's not coincidentally located right next to a school. Now, so you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out why their buildings where they train are located next to schools and hospitals and mosques, right? So let's see what war crimes are. Before we click on anything, let's hear from the audience here. Give me an example of a war crime, or a war crime that Israel's been accused of, what you think is a war crime, according to the Geneva Convention we're going to go with. Pardon? Okay, so that's one possibility. Maybe that some of the strikes aren't too accurate. That could be a war crime. Innocents and children, right? Hospitals, all these things are they're definitely war crimes. Rape is a war crime. Violence against women definitely is a sexual war crimes, absolutely, yes. Any other examples? Just generally speaking, what constitutes a war crime? That's a different topic, disproportionate use of force. It's not itself a war crime, but that is what is accused of using disproportionate force, correct? How you treat POWs or don't treat them, right? Okay, and there's a whole litany of lists. What we're going to do is look at a few of the key ones here, and we'll just go through them, and you'll see what I'm going to do with this one. Let's hit the first one. Okay, targeting international civilian airports. nuclear facilities, all right? So as I mentioned, that when the war first started, the first salvo of missiles, and there was thousands upon thousands, and there's no other country on the planet Earth, sovereign country, that would tolerate that level of fire into its population. These are non-guided missiles aimed at the general area of a civilian population, including in this case, Israel's only international airport, Ben Gurion Airport. That's war crime number one. Let's go to the next one. Tunneling into a foreign country's territory to attack civilians and murder and kidnap them, all right? That is a bona fide war crime according to the Geneva Convention. And we all know about the tunnel systems, or unfortunately, we don't know enough about them, but they are larger than England's underground. And I'd like to thank the American taxpayer, and I'd like to thank the European Union taxpayer, and I'd like to thank all the gullible people around the world who have made the Palestinians per capita the largest recipient per capita of foreign aid. Now, those billions of dollars you so generously and kindly poured into the Palestinian Authority, very little actually gets the people you want it to get to. The two main sources of those billions of dollars of donate is A, private bank accounts, right? The top 4 people in Hamas, Tuvia, who have gone to meet their 72 virgins in heaven, are all mega billionaires, and they've never worked a day in their life. So that's your money in their bank accounts, in case you're wondering, right? Yasser Arafat's daughter has a net worth of $4.5 billion as she lives in Paris, right? Thanks to donor aid. So that's one source of the donor money. The second one, of course, is this insane tunnel system where billions have been spent on this tunnel system as well. So yes, that's a war crime. Next. Using protected sites such as schools or mosques to store munitions or attack from. Once you use a school or a mosque to store munitions or attack from, it is no longer protected by the Geneva Convention. It becomes a legitimate military target. Okay? There's no hospital six. We'll talk about the hospital issue separately. That's a whole different issue, the hospital issue. We'll talk about that separately. I'll talk about schools and mosques here. Okay? But it does apply to hospitals, but we'll go on to that. Next. Breaching internationally agreed ceasefires. What people tend to forget when you do cause and effect is on the 6th of October 2023, there was a ceasefire in place. Cause and effect, right? I watched this film yesterday about college campuses. You wouldn't even believe that there was a massacre of Jews that happened. You wouldn't believe there was all this incredible violence and rape and massacre when the ceasefire was breached by the Hamas, all right? Which is a war crime. It was an internationally agreed ceasefire, clearly not worth the paper it was written on. What's the next one? Using child soldiers. So when it gets to talking about statistics from the famous or infamous Hamas Gaza Ministry of Health, we'll talk about how everyone killed just seems to be a woman or a child, but then again, anyone below the age of 18 is signified as a child, and there's a significant amount of children of that age being used as child soldiers in Gaza as well, which is a war crime, by the way, just like it is anywhere else in the world, such as in Africa. Next. Using civilian shields, we'll get onto that as well. Firing rockets at civilian populations. If you deliberately aim at a civilian population, that's a war crime. If you're aiming at a military target and the civilians are killed, that is an accident. America's done that plenty times as well, by the way. In the Iraq War, America heard a rumor that 2 of Saddam Hussein's sons were in a building in downtown Baghdad. Based on that rumor, they put a bunker buster on the building. They left an 80-foot crater in the ground, killed 360 people, and they weren't even in the building, right? So there's enough of that to go around. But if you fire deliberately at civilian populations with unguided missiles, that's a war crime, just like it was in World War II when the Germans fired V-1s and V-2 rockets at the British population. Okay, next. So when I quote people, I like to quote people who are not members of the tribe. So how many people here have heard of Colonel Richard Kemp? Hopefully a few of you at least. What? You met him, good for you. All right, so Colonel Richard Kemp is not a member of the tribe. In fact, he's a Roman Catholic. He's not Israeli, he's British. And he was the commander of the British forces in Afghanistan, also fighting a similar type of counterinsurgency war when you're fighting against terrorists embedded in a civilian population. So he has no vested interest, right? He's not Israeli. He's not a colonel in the IDF. He was a colonel in the British Army. And yet, he's one of the greatest, not just friends of Israel, one of the most outspoken proponents of the ludicrous accusations against Israel. Now, if it's going to be the IDF spokesperson or someone who's Jewish or Israeli, you say, oh, well, they have a vested interest. I also met Colonel Kemp. He actually came out to my unit on Hanukkah, and I asked him why he's so outspoken in defending the IDF, and he just said he was raised in a sense of moral principles where there's wrong and right in this world, and the IDF is on the side of right, and this is what he said, Colonel Richard Kemp. Legally, if the IDF believed the school was being used to store munitions or as a sniper point, then school, mosque, ambulances, etc., ceased to have its protection under the Geneva Convention and is a legal, lawful target. Colonel Richard Kemp, and he was, again, the commander of British forces in Afghanistan. We'll hear more from him later. Next. So, this is in Arabic, it's translated to English over here. When the bombs start happening in Israel, as you've probably seen from the movies or heard about it, a siren goes off and people rush to the shelters. The closer you are to Gaza, the less time you have to go. If you're on a kibbutz like Kibbutz Be'eri or Kfar Aza, they literally had 15 seconds to go to their shelter. That was their daily reality before this, right? So that means next to every bus stop, in every kindergarten, there was always a bomb shelter within 15 seconds of when you hear the siren. And when you get to Tel Aviv, you have the luxury of a whole minute and a half to get to the shelter. That's what happens when bombs start falling indiscriminately aimed at civilian populations in Israel. When Israel retaliates and responds, aiming at terror targets in Gaza, they also react, but they react differently. They call on their civilians to stand on the rooftops of their houses. Why? Because there are no bomb shelters. Are the tunnels? Sure they are. Who's in the tunnels? Hamas fighters. Where the civilians, they are told, go stand on the roof of your houses. Literally, right? Now, anyone who's familiar with World War II would know that the British underground system was also used as a bomb shelter as well, because it was so deep under the ground. There's enough tunnels in Gaza to shelter the entire population, but if you're not a card-carrying member of Hamas, you're not allowed in those tunnels. You're told to go on the roof. Why? To protect the munitions and fighters of people under the ground. 2, Hamas want Israel to kill their civilians for propaganda value. Now, this is something that we in the Western world, with our set of moral compasses and values, can't wrap our heads around, right? Because in Judaism, you have something called Kedushat Chaim, which means the sanctity of life, right? And Golda Meir famously said, when they love their children more than they hate the Jews, then there'll be a chance of peace. They want civilian casualties. They want them. Try and wrap your head around that. It's very, very difficult, right? Because it's a whole different moral compass and barometer than what we're thinking of, because it provides propaganda value. The famous case, because who mentioned hospitals? Hospitals. The famous case was in November 2023, or the infamous case, the Al-Shati hospital in Gaza. There was a bomb, a missile fell on the hospital, or so we thought. Right? Or so we thought. I was in the army at the time. We were in a different area, but obviously we all heard about this thing. And within minutes, don't ask me how, the Palestinian Ministry of Health had all the numbers. 500 people killed, and it was spread out the world. The great, venerable, totally unbiased, non-agenda newspaper called the New York Times had that on their front page the next day. 500 massacred in a hospital. All the celebs and all the stars got on board with this number as well. And I'm a huge football fan. That's like the round thing you kick with your foot. And we have a player on my team, Liverpool, called Mohamed Salah from Egypt. It was on his Instagram, and he's got almost 1 billion followers. Massacre at hospital, right? 500 people massacred in a hospital shooting. That was all over the world. What was the reality? As soon as it happened, within half an hour, the intelligence officer of my unit said that's not what happened, but we're doing all the investigations before we get back. Again, to quote Mark Twain, do you know the famous quote about lying and the truth? By the time the lie is halfway around the world, the truth, it's just putting his pants on, right? And that's one of Israel's major problems, the way we explain things. We take too long. And, I'm prepared to look at our flaws as well. So the next day, the truth came out. A missile fell near the hospital. It was actually in the parking lot, right? It wasn't fired by Israel. It was a misfired missile by Islamic Jihad, one of the crazy terror organizations there. And the grand total of 13 people were killed, right? Not 500. But that was already lost, right? By the time the New York Times did a vague apology, very vague, somewhere on page 12, it was lost, right? So they want those numbers. They want to say 500 were killed. And believe me, even though it was lost and disproved, those 500 went on the casualty list, right? They went to the casualty list. If anyone watches or listens to the PBC, the Palestine Broadcast Corporation, sometimes mistakenly called the British Broadcasting Corporation, you'll notice they always have to finish every article with, and according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, 49,000 people are being killed in the conflict. What you're not hearing, and I heard this 2 weeks ago from Ambassador Michael Oren, the former ambassador to the United States from Israel, who himself, as you probably know, is American, born from New Jersey, PhD from Princeton, very bright guy. He said, when you analyze these numbers, there's a few things you're not hearing. One is, according to international estimates, there are about between 8 and 15 people dying daily of natural causes in Gaza. Their numbers are put on the list as well. That's 8,000 people have been killed, not by being killed, have been killed by lack of oxygen to the brain. It's known as dying, right? It's a natural death, right? They're put on the list as well. It's estimated at least half the people killed have been Hamas terrorists. They're put on the list as well. People who are under 18 who are Hamas terrorists are put on the list as well because they're children. And people who are accused of dying, such as the 500 who didn't die in the hospital attack, they're put on that list as well. So these numbers are highly conflated, never ever challenged, and they're just written like they are, quote unquote, the gospel truth, but they're not. The fact is that they want the deaths of their own citizen is inconceivable to civilized mind. Let's move on to the next thing. Proportionality, that's another big word you hear bandied around, right? Just click the first one, if you don't mind. The claim is because there are more people being killed in Gaza than Israel, it is not a proportional war. How many people have heard that claim? Probably all of you, right? You hear bandied on the mainstream media all the time. This is a disproportionate conflict. We're going to hear from another non-Jewish friend of Israel, who I hope you're a bit more familiar with. How many people here have heard of Douglas Murray? Okay, we're going to hear his views on proportionality. And again, he's got no, as you say in America, he's got no skin in the game, right? He's not Israeli, he's not Jewish, and yet you can hear how he interprets proportionality. But first of all, let's have a look at that claim here. It's only about the numbers. In other words, if you always hear these numbers, 1,200 were killed, were massacred, were butchered, were raped, were burnt to death on the 7th of October. But Israel's got so much more, it's a disproportionate war. You hear it all the time, and it sounds logical on the surface until you unpack it. Proportionality does not refer to numbers. So what do you think it does refer to if it's not about numbers? Okay, anyway, any ideas of what we do in the next click? If it's not about numbers, what does proportionality, do you think, refer to? Strength, savagery, that's interesting, because we'll hit that. Douglas Murray has something to say about that. In other words, maybe it's not about the numbers, maybe there's something we're missing here, because on the surface it looks like it's all about the numbers, but it's not. First of all, Israel shouldn't be lectured by the world, but we'll come into this. It's not, let's go to the next one, so I don't mean that one. Proportionality. So this, what you see over here in Arabic, from right to left, is what is dropped on the any area where there's going to be a conflict in Gaza. We are the only people, if anyone's read Sun Yat-sen's The Art of War, it's been around for about 2,000 years, a pretty good book to read, even if you're not a warrior, just about life in general, about business, it's a great book to read. One of the worst things to do is to lose the element of surprise, and Israel does this time and time again. We SMS tens of thousands of phones. We drop these leaflets saying in Arabic, evacuate this area, there's going to be a military attack here on terror strongholds, and we wait. Now, if that's not enough, Diana, you would think, we also have a non-lethal roof knocking ordinance, which goes and knocks on the roofs of the apartment buildings saying evacuate. That could have been a real bomb, but this is a non-lethal bomb warning you to evacuate. There's no other army, including the United States and the UK Army on the planet Earth, that does so much and goes out of its way to avoid civilian casualties as the IDF does. It should make us all proud. If there's a military target and there are civilians nearby, the IDF must decide whether that military weapon can harm its soldiers, civilians. Proportionality. In other words, you've got a mortar You've got launches inside schools or hospitals or mosques. Okay, carry on. Even if there's civilians close by, the IDF under laws of Geneva Convention can hit it. That's the letter of the law. An army is not required to warn the enemy with leaflets, SMSs, hardest munitions, phone calls, and the IDF does all of these. In fact, they go much further. Let's go to the next slide. We're back onto Douglas Murray on proportionality now, right? And I'll read this whole quote because I've got the accent for it as well. And you'll hear what proportionality would mean if you're really going to take it literally, which is absurd, clearly, but this is what he does. If we were to decide we should have this fetish about proportionality, he doesn't use the word fetish lightly, it would mean that in retaliation for what Hamas did in Israel on Saturday, October the 7th, Israel should try and locate a music festival in Gaza, and good luck with that, and rape precisely the number of women that Hamas raped that Saturday, kill precisely the number of young people that Hamas killed on Saturday. They should then find a town of exactly the same size of a town like Sderot, and make sure they go door to door and kill precisely the correct number of babies that Hamas killed in Sderot on Saturday, and shoot in the head precisely the number of old age pensioners that were shot in Sderot on Saturday, just to choose one town. That shows you how ludicrous this word is that's bandied around the whole time, proportionality. It's not, if anyone's seen this Sheryl Sandberg documentary on sexual violence, anyone see that one? Right? It's not horrendous, by the way. It wasn't that they were just raped. They found that mutilation beyond belief, right? Not just the women to the men as well. We're not going to do that. We're not those people, right? That's what proportionality is. Let's do exactly what they did to us. No, it's not the way that it works. And I can conclude before I open up for Q&A with another soundbite from Colonel Richard Kemp again. Talks about morality. Right? I deliver in concluding with two non-Jews who are objective about this as well. But clearly there's right and there's wrong and there's good and there's evil. And this is what Richard Kemp says. The idea of policy is not to deliberately target civilian populations. If the IDF hit a target, they didn't know there was civilians inside, that is not a war crime, it's an accident. The IDF have gone a lot further than they are required to do under the Geneva Convention. Finally, the last quote, just puts it on. The Israeli army have taken greater steps than any other army in the history of warfare to minimize the harm to innocent civilians in a combat zone. And as I'm talking, because I'm doing stream of consciousness here, I quickly decided to show you a 20-second clip to finish with, and this is real footage. This is footage from the one I just showed now, it's by the kids. This is footage from an Israeli drone. Before Israel attacks a target inside the Gaza Strip, there's drones on up ahead 24/7, including thermal imaging drones. Before they actually call in the actual airstrike, they monitor the site they're about to strike. These are kids making these decisions with international lawyers in the room, of course, and decide whether there's too much collateral damage and maybe they're going to abort the strike itself, right? So I'm going to show you footage now. Do you see that ambulance drone one? Of this happened a few months ago. Yeah, that one there. We have to remember to get rid of the subtitles if we can. Okay, wait. Let's just start. Okay. Okay, now let's just go back to the beginning and start again. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Go back to the ending and press pause. All right. Okay, so this footage here was was taken by a drone. It's recently been declassified. A friend of mine in the IDF spokesperson's office, and I told him I was speaking abroad in my 2 weeks outside of Israel, and I got this footage. This is a house inside the middle of the Gaza Strip. Inside this house, Israeli people on the ground. If any of you watch Fauda, we have people who are on the ground as well. Identified the two of the prime perpetrators of October the 7th were inside this house over here. So before they took it out, and the plane's already on the way there to take it out, they sent in a drone just to look around the house to see if there's like kids playing or stuff like that, decide whether they can make the strike or not. The drone's on top of the house. They have to make a decision within seconds whether to call in the airstrike or call it off. And just before they make the decision, and again, there's international lawyers in the room. I've met some of these lawyers who are experts on this as well. Just outside the wall here, you're about to see an ambulance pulls up in front of this compound, and they see two people. They can't identify them. They see these two blurs, probably armed, running towards the ambulance. Let's go on for a few seconds and get ready to pause. That's the ambulance there. Okay, leave it there. So they're seeing, this is not made for a TV movie, this is actual footage, right? They're seeing two people running to the ambulance, they say potentially armed. They know they're looking for two terror suspects in the house, running towards the ambulance, potentially armed. They're about to jump on the ambulance, and the ambulance is about to drive away into the sunset. So I'm going to pause this moment here. I think that you are in that drone control room, you've got the international law, you're there. What do you do next? They run to the ambulance drives away. Do you take out the ambulance, or do you not take out the ambulance? These are decisions that have to be made multiple times a day, just to get in the mindset over here, by young Israelis and by international lawyers, yes or no. So it's with a show of hands here, and you're not allowed to plead the fifth here. Show of hands, how many people think there's enough probable cause to take out that ambulance when it drives off? And they think maybe in that position they would do that. Okay, how many people here think that there are blobs, they are black, maybe there's actual wounded people in the ambulance, and it is against the Geneva Convention to shoot an ambulance. There's not enough probable cause on our moral ethical army that we shouldn't take out the ambulance. How many people think that? Okay. Many, many less hands went up. Let's see what happens. It drove off and they didn't fire on it. All right? This is what actually happened. How does that make you guys feel? Because most hands definitely went up. Again, it's very difficult to decide if you're not actually there. There's an expression in the Mishnah, Al Tadur Ben Adam, Ad Stomeh Bimkomo. You can't judge someone until you're actually in their place, right? So we're just talking theoretically here. Most of those hands shot up. Well, how do you guys feel about that? The ambulance just drove off, and potentially there could have been terrorists on them. Let's be realistic. There probably were, right? How do you feel about that? Pardon? Unless it's being used for terror, then you can. Then it's no longer protected, correct? Yeah, yeah. So how do you guys feel about the fact that drove off? And that's a real thing. That actually happened, that, by the way. You understand it? Does anyone like I heard frustrated. Does any other emotions come up? They said potentially they couldn't. It looked like they were holding something on their side. Just from the very blurry imagery, it looked like there was definitely a potential. We're not 100%, if that's the answer. Pretty likely, but not 100%. Yeah.
We already have a bad marketing problem to begin with. If they're running to the ambulance, how much do they need the ambulance?
Okay, you're being way too logical, but yes. Right. Okay, and last. Right, so we have international legal experts in the room, and they made a decision, because that slight bit of doubt, we're not going to do it. So one answer I did not hear, guys, and I just have to wrap up over here for a second. I can take questions afterwards. One thing I'd like to add on is that nobody here said pride. You were about to say it? Okay, yay, okay. So you're not nobody, you're somebody. Okay, so I once... she felt proud of it. It was they took the moral and ethical high ground, despite the fact there was a very small chance that they actually were innocent, right? But Israel, when in doubt, takes a moral and ethical high ground. So the soundbite I want to finish with, I took a group of teenagers to an Israeli Air Force base. We had this wonderful female combat pilot, an F-15 pilot, and she explained to my kids, these American teens that was there, that she was in a whole G suit and everything. She said she'd just come back from Gaza. She'd flown there 7 times on a mission to bomb a terror target. And every time she got there, the mission was aborted because of that slight doubt. Every time, 7 times. You loaded up, you got all the adrenaline, aborted, go back to base. 7 times. So one of these American teens said to her, weren't you frustrated? 7 times you're ready to go, and it's aborted at the last second. She said, on the contrary. I'm proud and honored to belong to a country and a military that has such high ethical and moral standards. Thank you very much.